Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Chetan. I'm the product manager for 360 videos and Live 360 at Facebook. My team is responsible for thinking about how to help people connect with one another through immersive media, such as 360 photos, videos, audio 360, and Live 360. We're trying to help people form communities and find a sense of belonging by sharing their experiences through this advanced media format, which allows you a unique experience not there through traditional media formats. We've had 360 video for 2 years as of September last month, actually. This talk is going to go through a bit of the problems that we've identified with bringing a media format to the masses, some of the solution frameworks we've developed to actually tackle these problems, as well as some examples of how we've applied this framework with concrete product changes. The hope is that if you walk out of this having a better understanding of what it will take to make 360 videos or 360 photos reach mass adoption, you have an understanding of the role you can play, and you have an understanding of the role that creators, vendors, developers, and distributors all have to do together, then that'll be a success. So quick array of hands. How many people here are familiar with 360 media? 360 videos, photos, audio, live? OK, majority of the room. How many people here might own a 360 camera of some sorts? OK. And how many of you are familiar more on the VR side with VR headsets? OK, good audience. First, let's just run through a little bit of what exactly is media about. Why does media exist? What is the purpose of media? If you consider that humans are social creatures, we like to talk to one another. We like to learn about what's going on in our lives. We like to share experiences through word of mouth, through written form, through recordings of photos, videos, live streaming. The goal of this is to kind of experience things for each other and learn about the world around us, to learn what's going on, and to kind of use media as a medium of expression. When you look at this, there's a lot of options in media. You have text, you have audio, you have various options, and each of these options tells a different kind of story. Now, what exactly is immersive media? Raise your hand if you think something like a landscape video or a vertical video qualifies as immersive media. OK, most people don't think it qualifies as immersive media. I would agree with that. To me, immersive media is not about the format or the way that the content is displayed to you. It's about the experience. It's about the level of agency you have and your role in that consumption experience. The way I kind of try and think of immersive media formats are things like 360 photos, videos, audio 360, where you're not viewing something as if you were watching a television set with some sort of content. You're actually an actor in the scene. You're a character that's involved that influences how the content is consumed. You have agency and control over what experience you get. You can define the value of the experience, the story, and narrate it while looking around. That agency is the characteristic that makes immersive media immersive, that interactive capability, something that traditional media will not be able to give you. Now, what are some of the challenges of bringing these formats to market? It's helpful to first go through a little bit of a list of what are the different formats out there. What are the different formats that have reached mass success, mass adoption? If you think about text, there's a variety of different formats text has been used in today. You have newspapers, you have books, you have articles, you have blogs, you have people writing notes to each other, letters. You look at audio, people have podcasts, they have music, they have hundreds of different genres of how that music can be spoken. You have audiobooks, you have speeches. You look at photos, whether it's a special type of photo that someone was taking through a certain type of camera. You have comics. You have digital graphics. You look at video. We can go on and on. All these formats have reached a decent amount of penetration, we could say, with the variety of the world, everybody. But this didn't happen over a short period of time. And the challenge is that as this format has become more and more immersive, more and more higher fidelity in the experience it represents, we've seen more formats emerge that go more towards this agency aspect with 360 photos, 360 videos, and now VR. Now, if you actually look at the timeline of how these formats have actually reached mass adoption, you can see that VR and 360 are rather new. They're rather nascent. They're still early, And they haven't gone through the decades or hundreds of years of advancement or refinement that these other media formats have. And that's where basically we go into what exactly does it take to make these immersive formats reach mass adoption the same way that everyone takes a photo on their cell phone, they have cameras for vacation trips, they write a post on Instagram or on Facebook, they shoot a message, they do video chat, all these sorts of things that we take for granted. Well, there's one thing that is very apparent. These different formats have different rewards, different value, and they also have different levels of friction. And as you go up the curve for reward, the friction normally goes up. One way to put it is, if I am trying to get a very high-end experience, I expect a high reward. And I'm willing to go through a lot of friction to create that type of experience. On the other hand, if something is low friction, even if it's not super rewarding, I'm willing to give it a shot. I'm willing to try it out. And as you look, you can kind of see that photos might be like the lowest hanging fruit. Then you have 360 photos, you have videos, you have 360 videos in VR, where the higher you go on the curve, the more expectation there is. And if that expectation is not met, then it causes disappointment, which means that people may not want to try to make that piece of content again. This is kind of central to what I like to call like the hierarchy of problems with media challenges. The first step is, well, what is the value differentiator for your format? Why would someone even want to use this format? What is the first thing that goes through someone's head? They have a story, they have some sort of experience they want to share. And they try and think, what format lends itself to the story the best? What parts of the story do I want to highlight to my audience? What is the kind of experience that will best represent that? If I write a text post about an experience I had last weekend grabbing a pizza, you might be able to understand what I did, but a photo or a video might show you the actual pizza that I got. If I went on vacation with my family and I was telling you about an amazing trip we had going on a roller coaster, you wouldn't be able to visualize the expressions or the emotion we had. But if I took a video recording or a 360 photo, you might be able to see that for a single moment. So the first thing is the media experience has to define the value it offers uniquely from other formats. This is the thing that actually makes someone say, I want to use this format. This is what I want to make. The next thing you think about is capture convenience. Now, what exactly do I mean by capture convenience? You could think of this as, if I wanted to capture this kind of content, would I be able to? How much friction do I have to go through just to be capable of capturing this content? So I saw a large show of hands from people who say they own 360 cameras. If you have a 360 camera here with you right now, could you raise your hand? OK, that's more than I expected, but we can see that there's a huge drop-off in terms of people who own these devices but don't have them with them all the time. And you could say that even if you own the device, if it's not with you, you're not going to be capable of capturing that content or utilizing that format. On a contrast, how many people here have a device that can capture video or images like, say, a cell phone? So basically everyone. That's an example of something that's permeated our society completely. Something that has zero convenience issues because everyone can just pull out their phone, record a video, go live, write a post in text, shoot a message, whatever. Now, if you get past convenience, you could say that someone is willing, they have a desire to create this content, but they may not know how to create this content. There may be a lot of efforts they need to go through to actually make this content created. They might need to go through a separate camera flow. They might need to have a separate editing flow. They may need to have technical knowledge, which requires a lot of time to learn. They may need to understand a whole new pattern of how you tell a story. That's, you could say, the friction of the workflow. And this is also a very big factor, but you could say that this is secondary to whether you even have a device you could capture with. And the last thing is kind of the end of the funnel. Let's say someone has worked through all these steps. They've created a piece of content. How do they define success? How do they evaluate if they achieved the goal they set out to? If you're trying to tell a story and somebody in the audience may or may not have understood that story, how do you ensure that next time you create a piece of content, you've improved your storytelling craft, you understand what didn't work and why it didn't work? And you can say that after 10 years of creating content, you're an expert in this field as opposed to someone who's repeating the same mistakes over and over. This is something that's often overlooked, but is very critical. Because if you cannot help someone iterate, you cannot motivate them to try and create more content. They need a reason to say that they're improving. They need to be able to evaluate that the quality of their content is measurable and that they can identify what is working and what's not. Now, let's just put this into layman's terms. Value differentiator, We clearly need to have a separate value proposition for a media format that's coming to market. That doesn't mean it has to be better, but it has to be separate. It has to be unique. It has to stand on its own merit. Capture convenience is simply, you need to be able to ideally have this with someone anywhere. If you need special equipment, automatically you're adding a ton of friction of ownership, preparation, and having that with you. The difficulty of the capture shouldn't rely on technical knowledge. Technology should enable people to tell stories, but it shouldn't hinder them. If there is a black box process by which someone can do something, great. But if you need to be a genius at how to use video technology, how to use cameras, how to optimize a workflow, then that is not great. And now last piece, you need to be able to have standardized quality standards, something that you can say as a uniform body of people, this is good and this is bad for these reasons. We can all agree that this was effective and this was not. If we can't agree as a group collectively what is considered good or effective, then it's going to be very hard to evolve a craft. And when you think about how long regular storytelling in photos, videos, text, audio has been refined, there's still a long ways to go for regular 360 photos, videos, and live 360 formats, let alone the other formats of the future that will come out. So how exactly do you overcome these challenges? So I'll just give a quick intro for people who may not be familiar. At Facebook, we've been working on 360 media for the past 2 years. We started out with 360 videos. We then launched 360 photos, audio 360, and most recently live 360. I'm not saying we've necessarily cracked this problem completely, but we've learned a lot of things along the way as we've developed these formats and understood what are the things that are hindering these formats from being adopted and consumed by the masses. So this is kind of what I would treat as our primary solution framework. The first thing to look at is ultimately consumption is constrained by the amount of production you have. If people aren't making content regularly, you can't really try to optimize consumption. But it's kind of a virtuous cycle. If you create content, the reason you're making that content is because your audience is going to react to it in a certain way. You're going to get a certain amount of feedback. You're going to get some sort of sensation of accomplishment, some ROI, whatever that ROI may be. And so if you don't tackle the consumption problem at the same time, people will never have a reason to actually make the content. So it's kind of challenging to kind of balance both these needs. The first thing I try to look at is, well, for the production process, there's kind of this hierarchy where first you need to define the value of an experience. Why should someone even try and use it? Then you need to optimize the workflow, and then you need to figure out how to get them re-engaged to make more content, how to iterate and evaluate success. And ultimately, defining the experience, the value that that provides, is down to the consumption experience. If the consumption is not optimized to make sure the audience has a unique reaction, which is extremely favorable, something that makes the audience go, wow, that was amazing. You have to make more of this content. If you were to record your child's birthday party in a 360 video, the ideal response you would expect is that people who watch that would feel as if they were present there. They would feel as if even if they were 1,000 miles away, they felt like they attended their nephew's birthday party. They attended their niece's new present of a dog coming into the house. They felt like they were with them. They felt connected. Now, to really make that work, there's a bunch of things you need to solve. You need to solve education. How do people consume this content? How do people actually get aware of it? How do they recognize it? Even if they build up a behavior of how to consume the content, they need to know when to apply it. How do they ensure that the experience is high quality? And then, how do they actually discover more of this content? If you find a really good experience and you want to experience more of that kind of content, if you can't find any more, it kind of is disappointing. So we'll go more in depth into like specific examples of this. But one thing to keep in mind is people have been adapting to traditional media for a long, long time. You could say even when you view content in your news feed, you're trained to kind of consume content in a way that's not active, because you're used to watching a video that tells a story for you. You're used to watching a photo where everything is laid out for you. Being able to actually consume something in an active context is very difficult, right? You have to shift your entire mental model of what you're doing. Like I said, you're not watching a television. You're an actor in the scene. And that requires you to not only prove that this is valuable, it's rewarding, but to also have someone understand when to use it and how to use it. So let's say you solve value differentiation. How do you actually optimize the workflow? How do you lower the friction? How do you make it more accessible? If there's specialized hardware, how do you make it where people could do things without that hardware? If they have that hardware, but they need a lot of technical knowledge, how do you make it simple for storytellers and creators or regular people to be able to tell the story without focusing on the technical hurdles? Focus on the storytelling hurdles. There's enough hurdles in just telling a good story. If you have to worry about cameras and how to make them work, that just adds to your friction. And then lastly, the metrics aspect. How do you actually identify what is good quality, what's bad quality? How do you inspire people by aggregating this content and showing to them? How do you ensure that if somebody is looking for the top content, they know where to find it? Let's go through some exact examples of this. Talking about things is helpful, but I find that visual examples and clear-cut points of how this is helping something are more useful. So in this first example, we're going to give an example of consumption education. If you think about the example I mentioned of passive versus active behavior, all immersive media requires an active participation from your audience, which they may not be aware of, they may not be willing to do, or they may not understand the value of. Because thinking about it, traditionally you're used to having someone like your post, comment on it, maybe click into it. If they now have to pan actively clicking through the content, that's a whole nother level of effort they need to engage in. And so the first step is just make them aware they can do something more. They have this agency. They have the ability to look around this scene. They're not just watching the front of the camera. They are the camera. They can look to the left. They can look up. They can look to the right. They can look down. They can even look behind them. And that's a whole new paradigm. So what we did was we made this animation which tried to help people understand that they can actually click and drag in a 360 video on web. We have a similar animation on mobile. But we saw often that people would watch this content for a couple of seconds, and they would leave comments like, why is the camera pointed at the ground? Who shot this content? This cameraman needs to work on their skills. And they wouldn't realize until later that they are the cameraman. They are the person that is behind the scenes controlling the story. From this, we found that people eventually learned, oh, wow, there's something I can actually do. I can actually do something. I can click, I can engage, I can look around. I have control. So this was just step one. How do you educate people? If you look at step two, it's like, let's say I understood one piece of content. How do I consume 360? And this is just showing the animation again in case you missed it. On mobile, you might imagine this is a mouse replaced by a phone, showing you can actually move your phone or you can pan and swipe. Second thing is, OK, let's say you teach someone a behavior. Just because they know how to consume content doesn't mean they know when to consume it. In your newsfeed, you might see 10, 20, 100, 200 posts of different people, different audiences. And if you see photos, you see videos, you know how to recognize them. But how do you recognize a 360 photo? How do you recognize a 360 video? How do you build an identity, a brand, that someone can look at and learn to recognize over time? This is one of the big challenges that's often overlooked, because people are like, well, if they know and read the post, they'll just understand, or they see the comments. But how many times do you actually do that when you're scrolling through? You need to make sure that the experience is clear-cut. It's something that they can attribute to an icon or some sort of distinct identity over time. And this needs to be something very simple and obvious. If you think about the play button, it's a very simple example of how videos have done this. If you think about GIFs, they have their own little icon that indicates it's a GIF. For us, this was the icon. It's this globe kind of icon with 360 with this animation that triggers when you actually see this piece of content. Over time, we found that this helped people recognize the content, even at other surfaces where they might just see a thumbnail. Just having that icon helped them at least attribute, hey, this is recognized as 360. This is 360 content. And through that, they can apply the behavior of, oh, this is something I can actively consume, and learn that. Now, one big part of the experience we realized was, if you're in a 360 scene, you're a character in a scene, imagine you were literally dropped into a brand new world as a person, and you did not know what was going on. You don't know what the story is yet. You're trying to understand, where do you go? You don't have a map. We realized we need to give someone a kind of map that they can use to understand where to look. And so we came up with this compass design. The goal of this compass was to at least give someone a sense of bearing, a sense of orientation, so they know what is the front of the video, what is the back of the video. They know where to look, ideally. There's a North Star. They have a compass that indicates where is the most interesting content. Maybe that direction is defined by the publisher or the author of the content. Maybe it's something that we figured out was the most interesting part of the content through other signals. But you need the UI indication, a behavior, or some sort of tool that someone can learn to use over time as their kind of guiding rod. And in this, you can see that there are examples of kind of the publisher annotated sections here where it's automatically directing you to that content, automatically panning you, as well as what might be customly set points by the audience. The key point is this is something that not only ended up, we found, helping people find a sense of bearing or reset themselves out of awkward positions. They actually learn to attribute this as a sign that something is 360. When they see this compass, it's another form of recognition that it is uniquely 360 UI. Now, when you think about quality, you might be thinking, oh, traditionally videos require a certain level of quality or fidelity. When you get into 360, the quality requirements increase significantly. When you think about 4K video as something that traditionally is very high bandwidth requirement, and 360 video requires 4K bandwidth for many scenarios, whether in VR or high quality experiences in newsfeed, there's a lot of challenges involved in actually making sure someone has a good streaming experience. When you think about 3D content, something available in VR headsets, which doubles that requirement, higher frame rate, which doubles that again, it ends up becoming an extremely difficult problem to solve through conventional infrastructure improvements. So we realized we need to actually improve the streaming technology we have, the compression techniques. And this was something that wasn't something that we could do over a single 6-month period. It required multiple years of investment. So what we did was we basically identified new formats that can actually make sure the video is compressed much better. Initial works showed us like 25% reduction, and then after another project, we got it down to 80% reduction. The consequence of this was if you were watching content in a headset or you're watching in feed, your traditional bandwidth requirement would not be enough. And so people might see a grainy experience, a low quality resolution. Because the challenge of how 360 is represented, you might see that Antarctica here isn't represented the way that you might see it and recognize it normally. This makes it harder to compress the content at the top and bottom of a 360 video. So we had to figure out new ways to actually represent this information. You can think of it as how easy is it to remember all the data at the top and bottom where it's very distorted versus when it's undistorted. So we thought about using something like a cube, which has a very simple representation of like 6 regular videos that are undistorted. This got us some wins, and this was a good win for feed, but we realized for VR, when you want to watch a 3D experience, maybe 6K resolution, you need something even better. You need something that's even more powerful in terms of streaming. And so over time, we developed the idea of, well, why not have a higher resolution in the direction you view and have a lower resolution in the directions behind you that you're not viewing. So this shows how like the cube map is mapped from like the original content. And then later on in this video, you'll see an example of how we actually developed something called a pyramid projection, which was one step along the way towards what we eventually launched called dynamic streaming, which made it where you could stream a 6K 3D 360 video at the same bandwidth as you might stream a regular 1080p video on your phone. Now, the reason this is very important is this is an example for video. If you have a format which is something like 3D, or you have a format which is something brand new, like a volumetric video, the challenges in the infrastructure and technology layer might take you years to solve before you actually have a solution that can make it accessible to everyone. And so that's like one big part of why it takes a long time to get these formats to market. Because until it's easy and accessible to everyone in a consumption manner, it's not going to be easy for people to buy into the desire to create this content. And so this shows the example of that pyramid projection where we might have like 30 different versions of this for every angle of the sphere so that you always have a high resolution stream. Now this was a success, but it helped us realize that if we wanted to solve this for all media formats, we need to identify these problems early and start investment early. This just highlights for 360 photos, it's a very similar problem. If you think about the fact that, as seen here, you're only seeing a small portion of the 360 photo, you're going to need a much higher resolution supported to make sure that people have the desire to shoot all the boundaries of what this format allows. If we can make sure that you can see this environment and look around in it, how do we make sure that people want to upload 130 megapixel photos? How do you make sure like if they're doing like a drone shot or like a stadium shot and you can zoom in really well to see every member of the audience that it's a high quality experience? So we did something called tiled rendering, which basically means that every time you zoom into the video, we have a version of it at high quality. Now, this was something that came along the way as part of the quality initiative, and luckily wasn't as major a challenge as video, but it was important to recognize that as we have these formats, they have new challenges and new requirements for what is considered a high quality experience. I talked earlier about author guidance, or having the publisher or creator of the content able to kind of guide the audience. This is a screenshot of a tool that basically shows you what we developed to kind of give creators the opportunity to annotate what is the most important part of their scene. You could think of it as they're framing or highlighting the parts of the scene that they want the audience to take away with them. What is the main message that they should not miss? And so from this tool, they can basically annotate different scenes, different angles over time. And from that, as the viewer consumes this content using that compass earlier, they can either tap the compass to automatically reset towards that angle, or they can actually just see that the compass has reoriented itself and get a sort of breadcrumb of where is the most interesting content right now. The idea is not necessarily to control the experience and take away agency from the audience, but it's to guide them. It's to give them a map. It's to give them a sense of direction so that they know at least there's no anxiety, no FOMO of I'm missing the most important part of this story. I feel really, really stressed out. I have to look every direction. And so this shows an example of how that tool works. But the key part of this is that we realized education and guidance is one of the most important parts for 360 media. If you don't know where to look, this is a fundamental problem. And while there may be a lot of stories happening in your content, maybe there's one focal point that cannot be missed, that is so important, everyone should see it. So this shows an example where in the scuba diving video, the shark, the scuba diver, various people are kind of the focal points, and this is reorienting them towards that content, while still giving them the ability to look around and reset into whichever mode they want to watch. You can think of it as a lazy couch potato mode almost. So if we can do author guidance, sure, the author may know what's the best part of their story, but there's another person that's with you all the time that you don't realize. Your friends, your family, other people on Facebook that are consuming this content with you. And as we've seen from live and other formats, having that sort of crowd sentiment of what's important, what's amazing, what's interesting, what's engaging is really valuable. So what we did was we thought, how can we make something like a reaction or feedback, sentiment applied towards the video, applied towards spatial media? So we came up with 360 spatial reactions. You can think of it as a way to give social guidance, where your friends might have priority, but even the people that you don't know can still guide you and ensure that you're feeling and watching the most rewarding part of the content. You can leave your own reactions, you can consume them, and you can essentially ensure that as you watch this video, if you're missing a piece of the content that's engaging, there might be hints surfaced through these reactions. The left and right side of your viewport might have a little reaction pop out hinting, look over here or look over here. The goal of this is to help people understand they're always watching the most engaging part of the video. Guidance is central to all of this. It needs to be a central part of the product because it is a central challenge to the media format. So quickly, just to finish that thought, the reason I keep harping on guidance is if you go back to the idea of friction versus reward, if someone puts in a lot of effort to consume a piece of content and the content doesn't wow them, the natural reaction is, I'm not going to put that effort in again. There's only so many times someone can be going through an experience and facing disappointment before they learn to attribute the experience with that disappointment. And so it's critically important that as this content is created, guidance is layered in at every layer, whether it's through visual elements, auditory elements, whether it's something as part of the product, whether it's something part of the natural scene, like people gazing and all naturally looking at a corner of the room where a monster might be coming out, or looking up towards the sky as an eclipse occurs. If you don't have that guidance element, the format won't gain traction because the audience will never feel incentivized to discover and engage with the content properly. So this goes into the last set of kind of examples on the consumption front. Discovery. How do you find high quality content? Now, there's two fronts to this. There's, I'm a consumer of this content, and I want to consume it. I want to have this experience which makes me feel excited about this media format. And then there's, I am a producer. I want to be inspired as a creator of this content. What are the lessons I should look at? What are the ideas I should kind of consolidate together? I don't want to just have a good experience. I want to be inspired to move on and make amazing experiences. This is a twofold problem. We need to make sure that people can identify the most meaningful content, both from their perspective socially, as well as from everybody's perspective. And in VR, this was a very big problem. So we came out with a made-for-VR experience called Facebook 360. which allows you to consume 360 videos, 360 photos that are meaningfully connected to you as well as unconnected. We made 4 feeds, just like with Facebook, where you can follow the people that you follow in your Facebook feed, your friends, pages, creators, and consume their 360 content. And then separately, there's unconnected content, Explore feed, a way to find the best content in the world right now that is being shared on Facebook, that is accessible to you, that you can consume. So regardless of whether you have a lot of friends or you follow a lot of pages or creators who make content, you should be able to find some content no matter what. And through this, you can actually have an experience where you can build up a graph. You can save content. You can follow pages. You can follow people. You can reshare that content. And through this, you can build up your graph and get more connected to amazing 360 content. You even have a section where you can basically consume a feed of saved content, which you might have saved on desktop, on mobile, or in VR. And there's even a section to view your own content, your timeline, things you've shared, things that you've published yourself, your own memories that are meaningful to you, your vacations, your childhood memories, various aspects. On top of that, it's just an amazing experience to consume this in a headset and see the high fidelity experience that's out there. And to do more interesting things, whether it's leaving a reaction on the content through a reaction wheel, the same spatial reaction concept, but with a more 3D interface. And as we thought about this, we realized, well, VR isn't the only platform that we should also be ensuring there's a good discovery experience. So on Connected TV, the Facebook app for Apple TV, you can also consume 360 video content. You can discover suggested 360 videos. Not only does this bring it to a larger audience of people who may not ordinarily discover this content, it ensures that people who want to consume this content have more options and can still discover it. So that's the gist of like the consumption side. There's a lot of things I didn't go into just out of constraints of time and relevance of bringing everything into this, but you get the idea. There's a lot of different problems in the consumption side that need to be solved for a format to really reach mass audience. And that's, some examples were specific and particular to Facebook, but I think a lot of the core problems that are in the space are applicable to all platforms. And it's good for people that are making content or are creating tools to help creators make content to be aware of them. Why are people not consuming this content as much? Why are they not engaging with it? Let's go through the production examples. So very quickly, what you see here is the Spatial Workstation, a set of free plugins that Facebook has released for all sound designers to use within the same tools that they already are using for sound design. First of all, how many people here are familiar with spatial audio? OK, that's great, a large audience. For anyone who may not be, spatial audio is essentially a way to design an experience which basically has a soundscape that changes the content that you consume through your ears as you rotate your head. In real life, as you look around, what you hear changes based off your orientation. This ensures that in a 360 video, not only can you ensure the experience is more immersive, you can provide guidance through subtle things like audio. But how do you actually get someone to create spatial audio? It's a brand new format, and not a lot of people may understand how to create it. Well, the first thing you could think is, well, if there's a large base of creators that already are designing sound experiences for traditional content, why not go to the tools they have already? And so the Spatial Workstation, these plugins work directly with the tools people are already using, meaning it's democratizing the ability to create this content for all these creators that already are excited about audio. Now, there's still a learning curve associated with this. But if it's in tools that you already own and it's free, the friction and accessibility, the convenience is already there. And so you may still need to learn, how do I place a sound within a sound field? How do I make it where that laptop is going to ring in 5 minutes and a sound will appear from it that sounds as if it's actually to the right of me? How do I make it where I ensure the reverb is high as if there's an echo in the chamber I'm in? These are things you'll still need to learn, but at least you have the tools, and one step the production process has been made available to you. And sound is extremely important. It's one of the most important parts. As we talk about guidance, spatial audio is subtle, but is extremely valuable to guide your audience towards a story. Even subtle things like dropping a sound of keys to the left of you may make you actually want to look to the left and see what happened. Hearing an echo in the distance might attract your attention. So this is an example of optimizing the workflow. Now, how many times have people captured content and then seen that it's a bit shaky? Whether it's 360 or regular. You might say that this content doesn't make you feel proud of the work that you've created. And the effort to actually resolve that content and make it feel special might be a little high. We saw this was an issue for 360 video. Not only was it something that might not make people feel great about their content, if they publish it, the consumers may not have a great experience, whether in feed, on desktop, mobile, or on headset. So we came up with this novel algorithm which basically automatically stabilizes 360 content. You can see how it's smoothed everything and it's aligned with the horizon now. So even in this action video of going skiing down a mountain or biking along this route, everything is crisp and smooth, making the experience much easier to consume, more natural, and also helping it make a characteristic of the workflow which might have been very technical and inaccessible, something that a creator doesn't need to worry about. A person that's creating content in their life doesn't need to think about. And a bonus is that you can do these cool kind of hyperlapse speed up videos to make your content a little more engaging if it's like a very long piece. One big problem we saw was with 360 photos, while a lot of people were aware of this, thanks to Apple's panorama capture capability, there was a lot of fragmentation in terms of the availability of a good capture experience on Android. Extended to that, not only were people not able to capture easily, many people didn't even know their phone had the ability to capture a pano or a 360 photo. So what we did was we defined and created a uniform UX on how to capture 360 photos and integrated this into the Facebook app. Meaning if you have the Facebook app on iOS or Android, you can capture 360 photos. Now, the purpose of this was if you have an Android phone, you now have a reliable workflow that you can capture a moment anywhere you're looking around. The value of this beyond that is we can actually grow awareness of this. If you go and try and create a piece of content through the Facebook app, you'll see there's a 360 photo option. You might be aware of what a 360 photo is. You might not. You might be aware of what it is, but think you need special hardware to capture it. And you can do this right now if you go into the app on the latest version and try and capture it. But the main value of this is not only have we made the friction lower to create this content, awareness will grow, and this will result in a lot more people able and willing and desiring to create this content. So that you can share the experiences around you, the moments that are meaningful, what's happening, and ensure that your audience, whether it's your family, your friends, your followers, all can see it. Now, one thing that we realized as we were kind of exploring the kind of camera hardware and the space of options to create content was we kind of limit ourselves when we think about the fact that we need to have content created through a camera. Why do you need to have a camera? Why can't you use something like a CGI engine? Why can't you use a game engine? Put another way, if I'm in VR and I'm having an amazing experience, why can't I capture that the same way I could capture an amazing experience in real life? So we thought, well, the reason is there's no such thing as a virtual camera. So we made one. We made something called the 360 Capture SDK. Here you can see Dead and Buried, a top Oculus Rift title. Someone here is having a pretty good time. They're playing, they're shooting, and you may not have seen it, but they're actually recording this content in 360 while they were playing. Using this SDK, you can easily capture 360 videos, 360 photos, and even live stream 360 from a game to Facebook. And then from this example, the value of this is not only are you sharing a memory or an experience in a more natural format that extends the value of VR, the interactive, the immersiveness, but you can now upload this to Facebook and view it on a headset, on a desktop, or a mobile device. Our hope is that by enabling this kind of SDK and open sourcing this plugin, we can get more and more developers thinking about how to make experiences, whether for VR or for gaming or for CGI, not only to engage the audience, but to get them to share the value of it, to re-engage their friends through sharing those experiences through 360 media, helping make VR more social, helping make gaming more social, and helping make everything more immersive through this format. So we talked about metrics really briefly. I'm going to walk through what exactly is an example of a metric, so to speak. Now, it's not a metric in the traditional sense, but heat maps are a good way to kind of get a macro sense of behavior from what is your audience doing, what are they reacting to, and why are they reacting to specific things. This isn't quite the final solution for metrics in terms of 360 media, but it is a step along the way. We've heard from creators often that what they actually like to do is they like to think of their content as having 1 or 2 focal points that are main concentrated interest areas. And as the scene changes, these interest areas will align as they edit their content, but they don't know which focus area is going to be the audience's primary focus. They don't know what is going to be attracting more. So they use things like text, logos, images on their content to try and attract their attention towards what they want them to look at. This has been a way that they can test and validate that is that technique working? Are people looking at the text in the center or on the left? Oh, they are. They're looking all the way on the left, even though the focus point is probably that island in the distance. Even though these icebergs and all these things in the distance are there, you can see there's still 2 focal points. And so they can test and validate these hypotheses and ensure that if they're making a series of content, or they're just making more than one piece of content, they learn from the first one. It's not a black box what's going on under the hood. A view or a metric like that might be helpful to understand how many people saw it, but how they saw it is something just as important. And so that's what heat maps offer. Now, heat maps aren't necessarily precise. They're not the complete analytic of how did someone consume this content, but they provide a lot of value. And so this is one step along the way on the metrics path, but we're hopeful to keep discovering more ways to help people understand how are people consuming this and what is the most valuable part of their content. What was the value an audience member took out of this piece of content? Now, in terms of workflow, hardware has traditionally and often been counted as one of the most difficult pieces that is slowing down the ability to tell a story effectively. People can't easily create 3D 360 video content at super high resolutions. So with the Surround 360 project, we developed hardware and software to build a rugged 3D 360 video camera that can capture 10K by 10K stereo 360 footage. It's rugged, it works, and the stitching software ensures that there is not a lot of post-effort required to process the content that was captured and edit it. This makes the workflow significantly smaller. Now, remember, I said we open source this. We didn't actually try and sell this. We're not a camera company. But the value of this was after we open sourced this technology, people from the ecosystem looked at the software, they looked at the hardware, and they developed their own cameras based off of this. The Endeavor 360, the Candao Obsidian, and the Zcam V1 Pro all were derived from this. This was great for us because we just really want to help creators tell better stories. Technology should not inhibit you. It should enable you. And the goal of this was to make it where technology was one step further along the chain. One thing we'd heard often was 360 video is great. I love it. But how do I tell a story immediately? How do I ensure that my audience is with me as I'm experiencing this? And so we looked at Live 360. We thought it's a very compelling opportunity because Live enables you to interact with the broadcaster in real time and interact with the other viewers of the content. Add in the fact that 360 enables you to interact with the environment, the content itself. We thought this was a smash hit of a success. This could be amazing. But how do we make sure that the process of going Live 360 is super easy? It's non-technical. It's something that anybody can do easily with the right hardware. And so we looked at it. We had to make it non-technical. We had to make it reliable. We had to make it something that was accessible to a variety of people. And so we came up with the Facebook Live 360 Ready program. This is a set of cameras, not all of which are listed here, which are available in the market for various price points, various use cases. We wanted to support consumers, regular, everyday people, as well as professionals, publishers, creators, anybody that's actually trying to do a very high-end event. These cameras range from being able to capture 1080p to 4K. Some of them can do spatial audio, but all of them work with Facebook. They have a standardized UX. You log in with Facebook, you select your destination, and then you stream. It's as simple as that. The value of this was not only did we define a standardized UX that anybody can use to go Live 360 and make it easier for new camera companies to not have to figure out what is the right UX, what is the right experience to make this easy. We made it super easy for consumers, and we saw this in how people started creating more and more Live 360 content. Now, while helping consumers was great, we realized to really penetrate the professional market, we needed to go to the workflows they already have and enhance those workflows to do Live 360. So we worked with several workflow partners on the software and hardware side, whether they were software that can enable you to do fancy things like overlays, graphics, more interactive elements, pull a Skype call into your 360 Live, pull data into your 360 Live, put another video on top of your 360 Live of another angle of the scene that you're recording. Or there were things like, this is just a high-end reliable encoder that the industry uses. Regardless of what it was, we integrated with each of them and tried to ensure that no matter what workflow you want to use, there is an option that supports Live 360 on Facebook. This shows an example of the UI for Facebook Live 360. If you're familiar with the Facebook Blue app and going live, you might say this looks quite similar, quite familiar. That's because we took a lot of inspiration from it. We knew that there's two key elements of a live stream. There needs to be viewer and broadcaster interaction. And it needs to be simple and low friction. So after you log in with Facebook, you choose your destination, your page, a profile, the privacy, the content of the post, and then you just hit the button and go live. And once you're live, you can see comments, you can see the number of people watching the content, and you can see reactions. All the elements that let you know someone is there. You're not just performing to an empty screen. People are there watching your environment, seeing what's going on. And the advantages of this were things that we hadn't realized, like Live 360 was able to help people show their environments without having to feel like they're the focus of the content. They could tell different stories. They could show an event that's happening in real time. They could show an event that's about to happen. New types of stories emerged, not just 360 videos that would have been recorded on these sets, but content that wasn't inherently connected to 360 video originally. And then at the end, we have the nice little summary telling you how many people watch your video, give you a feeling of accomplishment, make you want to do this again, re-engage with you, the metric of evaluating success, you could say. So I've gone through a lot of lists of here's some things we've done, here are a bunch of problems, but where do we actually stand today? Where are we in the grand scheme of things? Today, 70 million 360 photos have been uploaded to Facebook, and 1 million 360 videos. Now, that number looks pretty good considering 360 videos launched about 2 years ago on Facebook, and 360 photos launched about a little over a year, last June, approximately, maybe a year and a half almost. But this is still not all the way we want to go. We want to go to 1 billion people on the planet, 2 billion people on the planet, everybody on the planet being able to use this media, creating it regularly. When you consider that there's billions of photos being created on a daily basis, tens of millions of videos being created, we have a long ways to go. And this is going to take time. But the biggest piece of all of this isn't something we're going to be able to solve on our own. This isn't something that we hold the key to success for. This is something that is a group effort. Everybody, whether they're a creator, they're a developer, they're just somebody that has ideas, perspective, they can all contribute and help. And so you might wonder, what can I do? Well, here's a few simple examples. The simplest one is push the boundary. We have this amazing new media format. This is something that you could say happens once in 100 years, maybe once in 500 years, where you have a brand new way to tell a story, to communicate, to share ideas with other people. Let's push the boundaries of that. Let's think of what are the kinds of stories you could never conceive telling before. What are the kinds of experiences you can craft? How do you actually make sure that people are excited when they consume this content? How do you help someone walk away from this content feeling, my life has changed. I did not think this was even possible. I've never been to the bottom of the ocean. I've never been on the ISS, but I felt like I almost was. And so whether you're a creator, improving your storytelling craft, making iconic content, inspiring people, or a developer, working on hardware or software, making better cameras, making easier to produce content, analytics tools, software to actually make the content more engaging when you actually consume it, more agency. Or you're a distributor. You have your own platform. Think about how you can actually solve the problems we mentioned, how you can help people connect to amazing content, consume it more easily, and produce it more easily. Ultimately, we have to do this together as a community. No one person will solve this problem. No one person will move this industry ahead. But if we all work together, chipping away at these problems, we can make it happen a lot faster and have fun along the way. So that's everything.